Cannabis 2.0 are essentially the cannabis edible products, right? So when initially cannabis got legalized, it was not into edibles. So
Okay.
when they legalized the edible part of the cannabis products, they brought in cannabis 2.0 regulations, and then they redefined how excise taxes are going to be calculated for cannabis 2.0, so which is essentially the edible products.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at independent ERP and digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. Cannabis is a unique industry. You have significant reporting requirements that are ever changing, and the priorities may change overnight due to the investment risks associated. Also, you run the risk of losing your license if you cannot comply with the requirements. For these reasons, the unsettling nature of ever changing requirements may make planning for ERP implementations increasingly difficult. But are there unique reporting and audit challenges in Canada? Or is cannabis equally challenging everywhere? In today's episode, our guest, Abu Asif, shares his insights into the processes of cannabis businesses in Canada. He also provides his insights into different business models in the cannabis industry and how Cannabis 2.0 differs from 1.0. Finally, he shares his insights into how the unique reporting requirements drive the ERP complexity for the cannabis industry and why the Canadian industry is different from the US. Let me introduce Abu to you. Abu has 13 years of experience with business transformation, ERP implementation, and business integration of SAP and Sage X3 products at mid to large size companies. His industry experience includes energy and utilities, gaming, retail, and the high tech manufacturing sector. With that, let's get to the conversation. Hey, Abu, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sam. How are you doing today?
I am doing wonderful and I am so excited to have you because the kind of depth that you have in the agriculture industry as well as the cannabis industry, obviously, it's very unique insight. It's going to be so fascinating for our listeners. Just to kick things off, do you want to start with your personal story and your current focus?
Sure. Thanks for having me here. I founded my company about 12 years ago. I used to work for PricewaterhouseCoopers
Yeah.
here in Alberta, and I saw a need for, mid-sized companies having a need for business process efficiencies and automation. So I founded, recognizing that need, I started my own company. And since then, we have grown, to servicing clients all over North America,
Very
with
cool.
some in Europe and the Middle East as well. So we specialize in the Sage X3 ERP software. That's the only software that we sell. And we specialize in the food and beverage industry, cannabis industry, specifically in the cannabis extraction and retail industry, and in general manufacturing and distribution industries.
Okay, very cool. So it's going to be so much fun to dig into all of those industries as well as the stories. Now, we have one of the standard questions that we ask before we dig into all of that, and that is going to
Mhm.
be your perspective on business growth.
So today's topic is about cannabis extraction, right? So I'll focus my perspective on that
Yeah,
particular sector. So cannabis, industry has gone a lot of turmoil. It flew off, when it first became legalized, and then, it faced the headways and challenges of any regular industry. So one of the key things, which an executive needs to keep a handle on is cost, right? If you're a CFO, cost is probably the number one factor which you need to have a handle on. It's true for all industries, but especially true for the cannabis because raising funds is not as easy as it was a few years ago. So all the systems and the processes that you have in place must be capturing those costs accurately so that you can make those informed decision making.
I completely agree. And I think the cost is going to be super important, especially
Hmm.
for the industries as critical as cannabis. For them,
Hmm.
the cost is definitely a driver. It could be a strategic driver depending upon how you treat it. So thank you so
Hmm.
much for that. So now we are going to dig into the cannabis extraction process because that's what we are going to talk about, right? So
Hmm.
maybe describe for people, let's say if they are not really from the cannabis industry and they are looking to know how this industry is going to be different, how the manufacturing process is going to be different in case of cannabis extraction process, and which are the companies that really care for this process. Describe the overarching ecosystem where it fits in the business model. So those two or three things: number one, the ecosystem where it is part of,
Hmm.
and number two, how the business process is from end to end.
So cannabis has three main sectors. So one, you have the cultivation, which is a more of a pure agriculture play. You're growing the cannabis.
Yeah.
Then you are extracting cannabis to make oils and vape products,
Yeah.
and that comes in the middle layer, which is the extraction companies or the processing companies. And then you actually have to sell that cannabis product to the end consumer, which is
Yeah.
become your retail.
Yeah.
One of the key, so the cultivator, a lot of companies out there are also vertically integrated now.
Yeah.
They'll own their own processing and grow facilities. There are some legal issues in different provinces which prevent 100% complete vertical integration, but these
Yeah.
are the three main key sectors. So what happens is they grow the cannabis, and then they will send it to a processing plant. So the processing plant will generally grade the cannabis based on quality.
Yeah.
They will convert it into extracts, and then depending on what kind of finished products they are making, they will use those extracts and make those finished products such as vapes, oils, etc.
Yeah.
And then they get sold to the provincial agencies like the AGLC, and then and then it's sold out to the retailers. So
Okay.
the ecosystem is, it's similar to what would be like for for liquor sales.
Yeah.
So you can't buy direct from the cannabis companies. You have to go through the provincial liquor and AGLC boards, etc., to buy it. So the key difference, it's very similar to a food and beverage industry
Yeah.
and pharmaceutical combined, right? So the main complexities come into play because it's a controlled substance,
Yeah.
and there's some very stringent reporting requirements to Health Canada and to the CRA along the process. So you have to report how much you have received, how much you wasted. Like each step has to be tracked and reported on a monthly basis. And that's where the difficulty comes in the cannabis business.
Very cool. So obviously there are very many layers to this discussion, and we are going to take one layer at a time. Obviously, the reporting
Hmm.
requirement is going to be in a lot of industries, and
Hmm.
in this particular case, obviously that's going to be very involved. But since you draw
Hmm.
the parallel of this with the liquor industry, and
Hmm.
in my experience, we have done one episode
Hmm.
with the liquor industry, and obviously it's very unique the way
Hmm.
their processes are. They don't necessarily follow the way the ERP processes are set up. I'll tell you the differences
Hmm.
that I observed in that episode and what I came to know from
Hmm.
the Canadian regulation perspective. So one of the biggest difference that they have is typically in the traditional food retailer or beverage retailer, then you are actually going to be keeping your inventory in your warehouse. You are the owner
Hmm.
of that. You are going to be selling to your customer. In case of liquor, that's not the case. Okay. So
Hmm.
you are basically responsible for the commercial aspect of getting the supplier. You are also responsible for acquiring the customer. You are also responsible for forecasting. But as such, you don't keep the inventory. When you are going
Hmm.
to receive the inventory, that actually goes in the LCO warehouse. LCBO is going to have control until you tell them which customer is going to buy that inventory. So you need to have the name printed. So obviously from the ERP perspective, you don't have the traditional sales and purchase order process because everything is sitting in their inventory. You don't really have
Hmm.
the account of anything. So is this similar arrangement in case of cannabis as well, or is it different?
So it's similar in some ways. So you still have that central buying. For example, here in Alberta, you have to go through AGLC
Yeah.
to buy cannabis. But when you place the order, it's based on your own demand planning. So
Yeah.
you're looking at your own system and seeing, how much of certain product you're selling,
Yeah.
and then you're creating a purchase order directly to the AGLC,
Okay.
and then they send you the product at your retail location. So you do not have a central warehouse where you can ship that product to, if you have 40 different retail locations, you're not going to ship it out to those 40 different locations from your central warehouse, right? So that's where the AGLC comes in. The
Yeah.
AGLC is going to ship that product when you place a purchase order for them. So depending on where in the vertical you stand, that's how it operates.
Yeah, very cool. So this is definitely different. I mean, especially in Canada, the alcohol distribution is far more complex than your cannabis.
Hmm.
Because in case of
Hmm.
cannabis, you are still going through your retail process where you have the dispensaries that are actually trying to sell to end consumers. But in case of
Hmm.
alcohol in Canada and in Ontario, I'm pretty sure that's the same in Alberta as well, because Canada
Hmm.
follows the same rule. You don't really have the retail locations for your alcohol. You have to go through LCBO, and those are
Hmm.
LCBO controlled stores and the inventory, and they have the complete separation for the LCBO inventory versus the vendor owned inventory. And once you
Hmm.
actually secure your restaurants or B2B customers that you are trying to sell to, they are going to
Hmm.
release the inventory once you have the order placed with the
Right.
customer. So yeah, so the business process, in my opinion, is going to be same. Do you agree with this assessment or not?
Similar, yeah. I mean, there's some similarities and some differences, yeah. So I mean, so you're ordering from the central body and just shipping to your retail location, right? So that is for the for the end consumer.
Right. And this situation could very well happen. Let's say if you are working in your retail supply chain, you are buying
Yeah.
from your distributor, you are placing the PO, distributor
Yeah.
is trying to release. But since you are buying from the government body, in this particular
Yeah.
case, you are going to have far stronger regulatory requirements. But as such, you are
Hmm.
still placing a PO and buying from the
Yeah.
distributor, and you can sell however you
Yeah.
like. As such, the government is not going to have control on that, right?
I mean, there's other control on, how much cannabis you can sell to a particular consumer. There are
Okay.
transportation requirements, there are storage requirements.
Okay.
So you still have to track and fulfill those from an end consumer perspective,
So, who typically
right? So
dictates these requirements? So, let's say if you talk about the limitations for the consumer, are retailers
mhm.
responsible to control how much it is sold for the end consumer? They are supposed to take the identity, they are supposed to record the identity, and then where do they report?
So they are supposed to record to the identity, and the retail systems are designed in a way to capture that,
Okay,
and they report it to various government authorities such as Health Canada. They can be audited for it,
okay.
and as well as their local boards.
Okay, do you have any requirements at the extraction level as well, or are these applicable only for the retailers?
Extraction levels have one of the most complex requirements,
Okay,
and it's, I mean, also true for the cultivation side. So you have to, basically report each step of the process, right? So
okay,
it is so detailed that, you have to report how much, if you're doing a grinding operation, for
okay,
example, right? You have to report how much you lost during the grinding operation. You have
okay,
to report how much you lost during the extraction operation. So if you
okay,
have a cannabis and you dropped it and you can no longer use it, in your production process, you have to report that as well. So it's a very detailed reporting across each step of the manufacturing process for cannabis extraction. So even things like how much moisture loss did you have? So you have to
yeah.
report that as well, right? So that brings a lot of complexity into that process.
So very interesting. So in this particular case, obviously, as we were speaking yesterday as well,
Mhm.
related to the challenges in the food industry. So obviously, I get the idea that what you need to report everything. But in a way,
Mhm.
let's say if you are reporting the moisture loss, you have a
Mhm.
lot of leeway as well, because who can predict how much moisture it is going to have and how much you
Mhm.
can lose, right? So what you could do is, since you have to report everything, and let's say if I lose a little bit of cannabis or I sell it to somebody, then
Mhm.
I can report it as the moisture loss, because that's very hard to
Mhm.
predict that, right? Is that possible? Not
Mhm.
possible?
I think there are some reasonable parameters around it, right? If you're saying you lost half of your cannabis because of moisture loss, obviously it's going to get caught, right? So I think there's a 2 to 3%. I think is the parameter around it. They're also, you report it every month to Health Canada.
Okay.
So so they're doing their own analysis in the background, right? They're looking at companies' data and saying, who's reporting more moisture loss, for example, right? So if you
Yeah.
fall outside those certain parameters, I'm sure they'll come for an audit very quickly. So it is audited quite a bit. Health Canada will come in and audit your facility regularly. So you really have to be on your toes to make sure that you're reporting correctly. And if you make a mistake in those reporting process consistently, they can cancel your license. So which can become, if you're a business, becomes a huge problem for you.
Very interesting. And are these vendors supposed to report as well? Because my assumption here is going to be you have the end-to-end traceability. They
Hmm.
are going to be looking at how much vendor is actually trying to report where you originally actually got the cannabis. So in this particular case,
Hmm.
I guess this is going to be either the cultivator or the grower that is going to
Yeah,
be selling you this, and then you are trying to process that, and you are trying
yeah,
to report at each step of the process, and then Health Canada is going to go and they are going to verify, okay, you bought from this vendor, this is how much you bought, this is how much you reported as a result. Then okay, what is the end result, and are these
yeah.
numbers adding up? If they are not adding up, then I need to go and audit you. Is that fair assumption?
So you have to report how much you're purchasing. You have
Okay.
to report how much you're purchasing in Canada and
Yeah.
outside of Canada.
Yeah.
You have to report how much you sold. But right now, the reporting requirement is not by vendor, right? So they are essentially purpose of the entire reporting requirement is to make sure what's entering your facility and
Yeah.
there's no illegal activity happening in the middle, right? So that's why there are those stringent tracking requirements, which makes it difficult to lose cannabis, I would say. So it's not at the vendor or a customer level yet.
So now we are going to try to design this process in the ERP, and obviously,
Hmm.
ERP has a lot of robust reporting. So now let's say if
Yeah.
I have the plain vanilla ERP process and
Hmm.
I am trying to map this out in the ERP system, obviously, if you are going to have multiple operations, if you are simply reporting the loss, it's not a big deal, right? I mean, you can probably map out in
Hmm.
any ERP system. So what challenges have you seen that are going to be unique to this specific industry where your vanilla ERP is going to fail?
So there are two main, kind of systems that people use. So one are point systems,
Yeah.
so they'll be specializing in just managing the cannabis operation. So whether
Yeah.
it's cultivation or extraction, they just focus towards that particular aspect. So the disadvantage with those systems is they're not tracking your cost,
Okay.
right? So you still have software, like QuickBooks or something where you're tracking your financials, and then you have point solutions where you're tracking your cannabis inventory and your processes. So the CTLS and specifically the B300 CRA report, they require you also to report on costs.
Okay.
So that's where this kind of system would fail since it's not integrated. The accountant just spend a lot of time trying to map the production and the extraction data with their financial system data and trying to figure out how much excise tax to pay, how much cost and sales reporting we have to do to the CRA. So that becomes complicated. A traditional ERP, where you have costing and manufacturing processes integrating, will
Yeah.
fail on two or three things, right? So one is the Health Canada reporting.
Okay.
Systems are not designed to capture that step-by-step process for Health Canada reporting. So, for example, cannabis comes in, and you have to grade cannabis.
Okay.
You're grading it A, B, or C.
Yeah.
A typical ERP, what they would do is they would create a work order for grading the cannabis, and but the complexity comes in from a Health Canada reporting perspective. It's still the same class of cannabis,
Right.
right? So in a typical ERP system, you have to have a raw material and it produces a new product code for a finished good, right? So
Right.
the finished good may be a higher quality cannabis raw feedstock, but how do you now report it, right? So that process, defining the boundaries around that process, how it's going to be reported to Health Canada, because it's the same class of cannabis, becomes challenging and a little bit difficult for traditional ERP systems.
Very interesting. So now we are going to do a little bit of workshop and the case study here. Okay. So
Hmm.
here, what we are going to do, let's say if I am buying a vanilla ERP, and in this
Hmm.
particular case, obviously I need to grade my product. So the way it sounds like is I need to have some sort of categorization at the cannabis
Hmm.
level. So in this particular case, I have the SKU, and the SKU has three different grades. So basically,
Hmm.
let's say if I have a field that could tell me that, what, grade one, grade two, grade three, is that going to be enough? If it is not going to be enough, what are going to be the challenges?
So it's it's not so it is. I mean, so you do it at a field level, but now that class of cannabis is getting consumed into further, down the extraction process. So what a typical ERP would do is, it will look at it as a plus and minus,
Right.
right? So you're consuming the same grade of cannabis and you're producing the same. If you just simply use the fields to capture it, it's not, it's a plus and minus transaction, right? So you have
Right.
to build more granularity into that process. At the bill of material level, you have to define also that, is this kind of transaction reportable to Health Canada or not, for example, right? So you have to go down to that level of detail. As you go along the process, so you're going to be using cannabis feedstock to produce a concentrate, a pure intermediate, for example.
Yeah.
So you have to report how much feedstock was used in pure intermediate, and then further on, how much pure intermediate was used to make finished cannabis extract, for example. So you have to track all those processes along the way and then report it to the Health Canada, and in some aspects to the CRA for tax calculation purpose as well.
Very cool. So we are going to do some more walkthrough of this process, the one that
Mhm,
you described, that, what, if you are going
mhm,
to do at the field level, then let's say if you need to change the grade in between the process, I think you are changing the grade in between the process as well. Your field level is not going to be sufficient because, whatever you are getting in, let's say if you're getting grade A as the input, your grade A is going to be the output. So are there any scenarios in which the grade actually changes as the cannabis is going through the process?
So the grade is at the feedstock level. So once you're consuming the grade, it's the grade that you're using. Then you're using it to produce a concentrate or a finished good, for example.
Right.
So the things that can change is the THC percentage, for example, right? So
Okay.
that's a key reporting feature in the cannabis. So what happens is, when you create a concentrate or creating a finished product, you have to calculate, your own lab has to calculate a THC percentage, and then you have to send that sample out to an approved third-party lab to verify the THC percentage. So that process also has its own complexity. Then you even have to report how much was sent to a third-party lab for testing purpose, for example, right? So you even have to track those transactions as well. So that's where all the complexity comes in, right? So now you have a THC percentage, you have bulk cannabis, which has a particular THC percentage. Now you can pack it into different kind of packaging, right? 5 gram, 100 grams, vapes, etc.
Yeah.
And then, but the raw material, so the THC percentage is the same now, right? So,
Okay.
But it's a manufacturing process in a typical ERP. So how do you keep track that THC percentage throughout the manufacturing process to reduce workload for the user? That's where the complexity comes in.
Very cool. So I'm pretty sure my listeners would need a little bit more details because obviously the process is very complex, right? So I
Exactly.
am probably going to need some more details as well in terms of how
Mhm,
the process is flowing. So overall, from
mhm,
the maybe talk about different SKUs and maybe take some examples of the finished products as well. How the packaging is structured and how that flows through the production
mhm,
process and how each of these percentages are calculated in the sampling process. In this particular case, you have the testing process as part of, and that's probably going to be as part of your BOM when you are sending for
mhm,
the test. I don't know if each product is going to be sent or it's going to be just the sample, and I don't know if you
mhm.
block the process until the results are going to be back. So do you want to paint some more colors there?
Sure. So I mean, from a high level, you're getting raw cannabis in your door.
Yeah.
So you're great. So for example, you're grading it. So you're undergoing that process.
Yeah.
Then it's going to, you're going to extract the cannabis components,
Yeah.
and you create those pure intermediates in concentrate form.
Yeah.
So when you're consuming raw material, what you have to report is, moisture loss when you're using it. You have to report, how much wastage happened at the machinery level,
Yeah.
how much other wastage like spillage, things like that, which happen. Once you have the concentrate, it can either, depending on your, demand and supply chain, you can run the process to have the concentrate available when there is demand for the finished goods, right? So now you have to also report how much quantity you have of those intermediates in stocks, the concentrates in stock. And then what you do is, you take those intermediates and create a finished goods, for example, so in bulk form.
Okay.
So once you have those cannabis in bulk forms, again, you go through the entire manufacturing process, and then at that stage you calculate the THC component, for example, right? The THC percentage,
Yeah.
and you get it verified by a third-party lab. So unless that verification comes in, you cannot sell that product to the end consumer. And then what you have, your system should have the ability to keep a lock on that product so that you cannot sell it to other customers. But once you have it in bulk product, then you are going to, do like smaller packages of that product. So another complexity comes here are the excise stamps.
Yeah.
So the government will issue excise stamps based on the province you're selling it to. and it requires you to keep a very strict inventory of those excise stamps.
Okay.
So now you again have to go through a packaging work order process
Yeah.
to say, how much you sold it to Alberta, for example, how much you are selling it to Saskatchewan,
Yeah.
for example, and then you actually ship the product out from your warehouse. The other thing is you don't know when, where the product is going, right? So it's sitting there in package form,
Yeah.
but you can sell it to Alberta at the last moment or Saskatchewan or wherever, right? So that adds another, since you have to put an excise stamp on it,
Yeah.
it makes it more complex to manage that inventory piece from a demand and supply perspective.
Okay, so that's very interesting. So I definitely need some more details about the excise stamp, how that is going to work. So obviously, in this
Mhm.
particular case, I'm pretty sure you are going to have some sort of lot traceability. I don't know if you have the lot traceability as part of the
Mhm.
process or not.
Yeah.
And I am looking for some sort of correlation. What is going to be the correlation of the lots to your stamps? Because stamps are actually going to be part of your production process because they are per state. So I don't know if the production processes are going to be segmented per state, but the stamps are going to be, so most likely they are going to probably have different bombs inside the ERP system. So do you want to paint some more colors in the process? The
Sure.
correlation, yeah.
Yeah. So there are two kinds of bomb. One is the finished good bomb, and
Yeah.
then there's a bomb for finished good with excise stamps.
Okay.
So the finished good is sitting in your warehouse,
Yeah.
and now when for example, you have to sell it to AGLC, you'll take that finished good, put an excise stamp on it, and then
Okay.
sell it to the AGLC. The other complexity that comes into play here is the excise tax rates are different by the product class
Okay.
and by the weight and where you're selling that product to, right?
Okay.
So if you're selling to Alberta, it's a different excise tax will apply. So for Cannabis 2.0, the way that excise taxes are calculated are different. And for the Cannabis 1.0 world, which is the EDN 55 standard, the taxes are calculated a bit differently. So that again brings in, you have to make sure you're calculating the excise tax correctly based on the THC percentages. And that's where the lot traceability comes into play. So when you're
Okay.
selling the product, you have to know because the THC percentage is calculated at a lot level, right? So when you're shipping it out to your end customer, if you don't know the lot,
Yeah.
if you don't know the THC percentage, then you cannot calculate those excise tax properly, right? And then the THC percentage also vary, right? So if you're saying you're creating a product with 8.6% THC,
Yeah.
you're not always going to hit that 8.6, right? It can be 8.7, it can be 8.5, right? So it's not, you cannot assume at that selling process that this is going to be a THC percentage. You have to build, you have to do that quality assurance tracking and track it at that point to the lot to calculate the excise taxes.
Very cool. So one of the terms that you mentioned during your conversation is going to be the Cannabis 2.0 and 1.0. So my listeners are definitely going to need some help here. So what is the difference
Yeah.
between 2.0? Are these regulations? Are these standards? So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
So Cannabis 2.0 are essentially the cannabis edible products, right? So when initially cannabis got legalized, it was not into edibles. So
Okay.
when they legalized the edible part of the cannabis products, they brought in Cannabis 2.0 regulations, and then they redefined how excise taxes are going to be calculated for Cannabis 2.0, so which is essentially the edible products. So that's at a very high level difference between the two.
Okay, amazing. So one of the comments that you mentioned during your conversation is that, some of the businesses are going to be just the extraction facilities, then the other ones are
Mm-hmm.
going to be the cultivators, but in some cases, they are going to be the vertically integrated, right? So if
Mm-hmm.
they are going to be vertically integrated, you also mentioned that they are probably going to have a lot of challenges, especially if they are using some of these point solutions. So from the business model
Mm-hmm.
perspective, let's say if I am vertically integrated and I'm the grower, as well as the extractor as well. So what
Mm-hmm.
are different requirements from the reporting perspective? Are the reporting requirements going to be similar for the extractor versus the grower? Are the reporting requirements different? Is the manufacturing process different? But I can almost guarantee that the farm accounting is going to be very different as well for the cultivators, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the challenge is not necessarily because of vertical integrators. A lot of extractors these days, they are using point systems and a different financial system as well, right?
Okay.
So, and similar with cultivators as well. So as long as you have two different systems tracking your inventory processes and
Yeah.
your financial processes, you're going to run into trouble. A lot of people go that route because it's a cheaper system to implement. and they're looking for short-term cost cuts. But as soon as you grow, you need an army of accountants just to track those data. And there's a significant risk involved because, if you continue to report incorrect data, Health Canada and CRA, they can come and audit you, and they can cancel your cannabis sales license and your, the Health Canada license as well. So that's where the risk comes in. You're right that the reporting requirements are similar from a Health Canada perspective, that you have to report the class of cannabis. So, for example, if you're a cultivator, you also have to report the seeds.
Yeah.
In the cannabis. If you're an extractor, you don't have to report that. So in that way, there's a differences in the class of cannabis that are reporting, but obviously the accounting impacts and all of that, that's a whole different ball game compared to a cultivator and an extractor.
Okay, so let's talk about some of these stories, the implementation stories that you have seen. And I am looking for the interesting stories where, let's say, you try to implement the ERP, but the customer was not really listening. You did everything that you could do in your power, but implementation did not go as well, because as we know, ERP implementations, there are a lot of different moving pieces involved. You need alignment of the business model. You need, strategic alignment from the leadership perspective as well. So in your experience, when you did any of the implementation so far in the cannabis space, did you run into any challenges, and what were those challenges? So describe that story.
Sure. I mean, so cannabis world, has some unique, challenges. So when it was initially in the process of getting legalized,
Yeah.
and soon after, there's a lot of money flowing into cannabis world. Every company was raising huge amount of money. There are companies which had, valuations more than $10 billion, right?
Yeah.
And they're not selling a lot. But what that created was they had so much money that they just wanted best of class in everything.
Yeah.
They wanted the best of class systems. They
Yep.
wanted best of class processes. And, we would just spend hours and hours and hours, trying to design the best possible process, right? Where you could have, taken, 2 hours to design a process, you spend 10 hours designing a process, right?
Yeah.
Because the money was there to spend on it, right?
Yeah.
And then suddenly the crash happened, right?
Yeah.
So they are no longer raising money. The stock valuations, from the billions of dollars came, into the millions of dollars, and now suddenly from day one, you have this huge amount of money flowing into now an absolute, cut down on the spend, right? So now they wanted to do the same process in, half an hour, right? So that created a lot of challenges from an implementation perspective, right? So,
Yeah.
Suddenly the cost expectation became very different. The support cost became different because you spent so much money on customizing the processes exactly what you need to now being very cost conscious, right? So you can't have the two running together, right? So that created a lot of friction, in the costing side of the world for the implementation. The other challenge that I've seen in our cannabis sector is there's a lot of turnover on the management side of things.
Okay.
If the CFOs and the CEOs, especially in the mid-sized sector, they change quite frequently. I've yet to see a cannabis client where a C-level executive is more than a year. Typically it's like 18 months would be the max that
Yeah.
we have seen, a C-level executive stay around. So the challenge that brings in is you go in implementing with certain ideas and certain things in mind, right? Certain
Yeah.
bases, and that when the C-level changes, those expectation changes, right? So it's like, why is this process working this way? It's because the previous CEO or the previous CFO or the previous VP Ops wanted it designed this way, right?
Yeah.
So that makes it difficult to work with the end customers, making sure everything's still aligned and they still have faith in the ERP system to deliver on the results that they need.
Okay, very interesting. So are you guys doing work only in Canadian market or also in the US market? Do you understand the differences between in the US market versus the Canadian market? Are the reporting requirements going to be different? Is the way the processing is done is going to be different, or is it similar?
So we predominantly do work in the Canadian market. We are thinking of expanding the US market, but one of the key difference is that it's federally legal here in Canada.
Yeah.
Right, and it's federally still not legal over in the United States. So what that has meant is, you have over 50 states, they have all developed their own reporting requirements. there are not many national companies, like you have, all across Canada, companies here in Canada. You don't have the same kind of breadth over there in the US, right? They're more state focused. There are more smaller companies operating over there compared to here in Canada. So those will be the key difference. And then each state has its own requirements. So right now, like it's Canadian requirements derived from those states. So in some ways they are similar, but they do not have a health like a federally regulated Health Canada or CRA reporting requirements yet. They may have state requirements, but not at a federal level.
Okay, very interesting. So I am actually going to go back to your stories where you said that, you had significant funding and you were trying to design these best in class processes, and then you had to cut down and, you had to accomplish the same goal, let's say in half an hour, right? So now I would like an example of what is best in class for the executives. Let's say they don't understand what is going to be the right process, right sized process. I mean, size is the word that I like to use depending upon the size of the company, depending upon their ambitions. Now, best in class could be very subjective. You might be at a stage where you probably, if you design best in class, that could be significant overhead. People are not going to like it because it might feel very bulky. The example that I like to use is, let's say if you want a bicycle as of today, you have a need of the bicycle, and then best in class could be a truck. Just because it can do a lot, but that does not mean that you should be driving a truck. Because if you drove a truck, then what is going to happen is it's going to feel like a truck. It will never feel like a bicycle. So give me an example of what is best in class, in this particular case, and how that changed to that half an hour process. In my opinion, I think they probably needed that. Once you are conscious on the budget, then probably you are thinking that, this is what I needed. Rest all is just unnecessary.
Yeah, I think so. Initially, there was since the budgets were high, they wanted to automate everything, right?
Okay.
So, for example, costing processes.
Okay.
They would be looking to automate. Go right down to the minute detail, how to capture those overheads. How are you going to, for example, utility cost? How are you going to build it into your process? For example, if you're in a startup phase, the utility cost per unit is going to be very high compared to when you're in full production stage, where the utility cost gets transferred over a larger volume of product being produced.
Yeah.
So things of that sort, they wanted to go into very minute details on, track those costs very accurately, for example, and how to transfer that to each lot. So you produce 100, let's say kilograms a month in Jan. So they wanted to factor the production and the overhead fixed cost at a very minute level, utilities, power, water consumption, etc., into that lot cost, right? But now when the costs, when the money is not flowing as quickly, they go with the simple way of saying, okay, we'll have 1% overhead or 2% overhead, right? As a simplification method to capture those overhead costs into the product. So that would be at a higher level. One example where, the best in class would be to capture everything in very minute detail and build it at the lot level compared to, doing it at a fixed percentage level, right? Which is not 100% accurate, but still gets the job done to a reasonable level.
Very interesting. So typically, if you look at the default ERP process, they are going to have the product costing built as part of the system, right? It is actually going to be capturing all of the costs. So why do you need the cost at the lot level? The cost at the lot level, unless that is required from the reporting perspective, did they need this for any specific reporting, or were there any implications that they needed to track at the lot level?
So if you're a public company, you have to calculate and report on the true cost of the product.
Yeah.
So that's why you need to trace it at the lot level, right? So it also allows you to do then a much better profitability analysis, right? If you're selling for $5, what's your true cost of the product, right? So otherwise it goes into that overhead category. So it has more to do with the reporting requirements at the stock exchange level and which stock exchange you are operating on. Right? Some stock exchanges have higher reporting requirements, others have less reporting requirements. So that's why. And a lot of these initially, a lot of the accountants and executives, they had come in from traditional industries, right? So they'll be coming in from larger food and beverage companies, which have been in operation for 30 years, 40 years, right? So they are trying to bring in that knowledge and just implement it on day one into a new startup in the cannabis world. So yeah, so that brought its complexities.
That's very interesting because personally, even in case of far more regulated industries, for example, pharma, what I
Mhm,
have seen is you are going to be doing the P&L at the item level. I mean, you are going to have the actual product cost of each of the items. The lot is going to
mhm,
be slightly more superset of your items. It's supposed to be a
mhm,
group, as the lot actually moved through the production floor so that you can have the forward and backward traceability. Typically lot
mhm,
is used when you have to trace the material from the quality perspective, from the production perspective, as well as if you have any sort of recall, you need to trace that. But I've never seen lot to be used financially in the P&L reporting. I don't know if they are using that in case of cannabis. That's very interesting.
No, it should be. It's used in a lot other industries as well, especially if you're a public reporting company. So what you see is that the lot is a level lower than product, right? So if they want you to accurately report the product cost.
Yeah.
So if you're reporting it at a lower level first, then it means you have amalgamated it at a correct level at the product level, right? So it's if your building blocks are correct, then it means your end cost is also correct, right? So each lot can be, for example, you're producing a lot and you spend some extra time on that lot for whatever reason, right? Breakage or extra machining time, you had to redo the process, etc. So all of that cost should be captured into the lot, right? So also from a management reporting perspective, you want to see how much profits you're making month over month, right? So that profitability can also change depending on the lot cost. Your raw materials can become more expensive, right? So for example, cannabis feedstock, in Jan costs $10 a gram, in February costs $20 a gram, right? So now you want to trace that, when you're selling it, what's the profitability on that product, on that lot that you're selling. So that's why it's done at a lot cost level.
Okay, amazing. So that's it for today. Do you have any last minute closing thoughts or remarks for our listeners?
So from a cannabis extraction companies, if you're a CFO and CEO, cost is always a factor. So we see a lot of people going, let's have a very cost-effective financial system, and then let's have a very cost-effective or a cheaper solution for managing your inventory. But what we have seen is, long term, that always causes a lot of problems in terms of accurate reporting to Health Canada, and you end up spending more money long term than what you have if you had put in the right systems in place from day one. So I think it's really important to have those systems in place so that you can grow and scale quickly when the time comes in, rather than trying to figure out those systems at that point in time. So a lot of ERP industry has evolved as well. So for example, like us, we have created those starter solutions where you get a lot of those features, but more on a standard business process way compared to when you're a much bigger company and you want to, really customize those processes according to your needs. So if you take that route from day one, it will be a lot better for you long term and more cost effective from a systems perspective.
Okay, amazing. And my personal takeaway from this conversation is going to be that cannabis is obviously a very involved industry and it's far more regulated, and the regulations are changing on a daily basis. So make sure that you have your reporting down. If you are going to have manual intervention in the process, obviously there is a high risk that, there is a chance that you might lose your license, and that's everything, right? So that's
Mhm.
why, having at least enough automation so that your reporting is going to be accurate is key for your business. On that note, Abu, I really want to thank you for your time. This has been a powerful episode. Of
Okay. Thank you, Sam.
course. I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully, you learned something new today. If you want to learn more about Abu Asif, head over to pennymanagement.com. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. If anything in this podcast resonated with you and your business, you might want to check other related episodes, including the interview with Dave Chrysler, who shares his insights into the nuances of the cannabis market and value chain. Also, the interview with Paula Courtney, who shares how companies can take advantage of the customer centricity framework to improve their financial performance. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the next episode of the WBS.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.